So you have a piece called Capitalism Unchained, and in it, you basically argue, and I'm going to quote, crypto's ideal state is to make capitalism more effective.
Capitalism is like nearly imperfect, but it is this like beautiful system where resources do flow to the things that people want.
All right, we're live. Packy, thanks for coming on the show, man. How you doing?
Right. Good to be here. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You know, I was reading some of your earlier stuff today just to prep for this. And in one of your posts, I don't remember exactly which one, you refer to yourself as, or you're kind of unsure on how to refer to yourself. It maybe oscillates between investor, writer, technologist, optimist. How would you introduce yourself to people who may not be familiar?
Yeah, I'm still working on that, but I think, writer and investor and those two things go together kind of more and more closely over time. So write a newsletter called Not Boring, use that to one, just kind of generally explore a lot of things. Like I think one of the things that hopefully comes across in my writing is I'm not that smart, but I'll put in a lot of work. And so like thinking through things on paper is super helpful. And then use it to, write about the portfolio companies we end up investing in and some other companies, but to learn and then to kind of help tell the stories of the companies that we back.
Right. And I do want to get into maybe your writing process, investing process, and all that. But I want to start from a place that might surprise you. And I don't think any of my listeners know this, but you in 2021, August, actually wrote a piece on Solana. And that I was at Coinbase at the time, and that was interesting. One of my first introductions to Solana.
Nice.
And yeah, and obviously now I'm, let's say, quite interested in Solana. But at that time, I was exploring, and that was one of the first pieces I read and reread multiple times, and it was quite comprehensive. How did that piece come to be?
Yeah, so this one's actually easy in small world. So Ben Sparango, who worked at Solana Foundation, was a neighbor of mine growing up. And so we had kind of kept in touch, and he mentioned there was some interesting stuff happening. I had been playing around and kind of seeing it. I wrote about kind of some of that in the piece as well. But I think the reason that I wanted to do it is, one, I ended up writing about a few L1s, and I like one of the things that seems to have died down maybe a little bit, but like I really didn't like about crypto at the time was the kind of like this L1 is going to do everything, and then like this L1 is like a total piece of shit, and like I didn't think that was right. And I think like kind of any product, and certainly an L1, comes with certain trade-offs, and I thought the trade-offs that Solana was making were super interesting. Got to meet the team, obviously think Tolly is incredibly smart. And had a pretty clear and different vision for what he wanted to build with Solana, and so wanted to write it to kind of go deeper into that.
Mm-hmm. And you also have another piece. Well, you have several pieces on crypto, but the other one that is probably most comparable to the Solana summer piece was, I believe, called "Own the Internet," and it was basically a case on Ethereum. And those two pieces, I would say, I mean, they're obviously a few years old. How would you say they've aged? Like, how has your mental model about crypto changed since then?
Yeah, when the bear market happened, I got a bunch of people who were like, I can't believe you wrote about Solana, like blah, 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 blah. Like, look at it now. And so happy to see the price back above where it was when I wrote about it. But I went back and reread it, and I think it actually holds up pretty well. I mean, like, nowhere in the piece was it like, you need to put all your money in Solana. Like, this is the only and best blockchain. Like, well, like, again, they're making super interesting trade-offs. I think like, high speed, financial focused L1 is a useful thing and different from what Ethereum was doing. On Own the Internet, I was probably a little bullish on ETH compared to where it's performed over the past few years, but I still think kind of like center of gravity, a lot of interesting stuff being built on there, and thinking through how it captures value. I think it holds up decently well. I think there's probably other ones that haven't held up as well, but I think those two, like generally hold up decently well in terms of like what both of those chains were going for. Like maybe like ultrasound money and like, you know, the like some of that stuff like probably didn't play out as well for Ethereum, but like in terms of this is a new platform that people are building interesting things on, and you can build kind of different things on the two of them, I think that held up decently well.
Right. And I believe you called yourself a maximalist minimalist, or maybe the other way around.
Yeah.
And where you say something like you believe that they will specialize in these functions and then they will interoperate between them, right? I want to maybe dive deeper on that. Can you explain what that concept would look like? Like, is it, and maybe the thing I'm interested in specifically is because you also have another piece called blockchains or platforms, right? And you know, a platform obviously benefits from getting network effects or switching costs and things like this. How would you, do you think that's kind of the ideal state for crypto, where you have a bunch of specialized chains interoperating? Or does it look more like, you know, a Pareto where it's like you have AWS, GCP, and Azure that are like the three heads of the market?
Yeah, I don't think it's one, and I don't think it's infinity. I think like probably something where there's a few chains that kind of make different trade-offs, but like nobody's probably getting fine-grained enough to care like very deeply. I think having a bunch of users and liquidity and other stuff on a chain is useful. The maximalist minimalist idea is kind of what I've been talking about. Like, I think it's silly that there's, you know, like such, it's silly, but also, to be fair, useful and kind of bootstrapping belief and getting people on them and all of that. But like just the fact that like people were like, this is the only chain and everything else is stupid. That's the maximalism minimalism piece. But I do think like any kind of healthy ecosystem has a few different options that cater to different needs in different ways. And, you know, I thought at the time, and probably actually, like if anything's changed, I think there'll be kind of fewer dominant, you know, L1s, but I don't think that number is one. Like, it's certainly not just Bitcoin. I think actually the thing that holds up the least well in the Ethereum piece is like, I have the picture of like somebody poking the Bitcoin logo with a stick and saying, do something. That I've like, one thing that's changed, I've like really come to appreciate the doing nothing and just like kind of doing the thing that it's supposed to do really, really well. But like, certainly Bitcoin's not going to be the only chain. And I think like there's a number between there and probably like 8 or 6 or 5 or 3 that is like probably the right amount. You tell me that. I mean, you're in the trenches building this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I just basically draw comparisons to all other software platform types. So like mobile operating systems, Android, iOS, gaming system, PlayStation, Wii, Xbox, app stores. There's always kind of like 3 or 4 that end up dominating. You know, when there's a market to be had, people just compete. So I would say, yeah, the idea of doing one thing or of one chain to rule them all is certainly somewhat an ancient relic at this point. And I've had the same realization about Bitcoin where at first, so I'm an engineer, it's like, oh, this is really cool. And then you're like, wait a minute, it doesn't do anything. That's kind of weird. And you're like, oh, wait, it doesn't do anything. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, to my detriment, I like complex things. And I like one of the things that drew me to ETH, I was like, oh my God, you could just like do so much more with this. And then kind of Solana after that. I think like to me, there's almost a, like the differences have to be wide enough. And like, so the Solana killers that are like a little bit faster or something like that, I guess like hasn't worked out, you know, particularly well. And so I think like there's some rule in there about like how big the differences have to be. Like obviously iOS and Android have like some major differences. And so like those, it makes sense that you'd choose between those two. Maybe the cloud providers fewer differences and like you just need kind of multiple and they have different sales, you know, different go-to-market motions and teams and it's just healthy to have a few players in that space. But yeah, it's like really like what are you going to be best known for? And if Solana's is like, or kind of was like speed, then like trying to be the third company that's going to compete on being like a little bit faster is like probably not the right approach. And so like that's probably the limiting factor there. So there's not that many dimensions on which you can like really differentiate.
Right. Yeah. I think most people at this point would probably agree, hopefully. But I want to get to some other concepts. In one of your posts, you say, quote, if I had to describe why I'm excited about Web3 in one idea, it would be that Web3 allows for the most rapid iteration on new economic and governance models of any system humans have built. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the shared infrastructure and people just kind of like building the like differentiated piece on top of shared infrastructure, I think is a really interesting and powerful concept. I think something that's been disappointing, a little bit recently is just like how much of that is just like PvP and financialized. And like, I was probably more like DAOs was one of the first concepts that I got introduced to and was like, holy shit, like this is amazing. And like has not worked out particularly well. And like, I think, any system where human beings are going to be allowed to a human being, like just like figuring out how to get all of the edge cases right is like unbelievably difficult. At the same time though, like I do think having a place where you can like experiment, see what works, like the idea of composability of something that is really exciting to me, like take little pieces, add it in, like it's almost like this like evolutionary kind of system where AI feels like actually frankly very different than that to me, where it's kind of like, you're waiting for these foundation models and then you can like try a bunch of like, we have agents for selling now and we have agents for this other thing. And like, it's actually like a lot less evolutionary. Like you're bottlenecked by this like one thing that you're waiting for, and then you can see what you can build kind of on top of that. But there hasn't been as much divergence. So I don't know, I'd love to see more of like the idealistic, like get back to playing with like totally crazy things. I understand why that's difficult. But that's one of the things that attracted me is that like you have the shared infrastructure, people are building different things on top. Ideally it's composable, and that allows for kind of this like evolutionary process to happen. And I do think that there's also something valuable. I wrote a piece called The Laboratory for Complex Problems, where like there's some stuff that seems really, really silly, and like you get to experiment on something like a monkey picture, and like people are like, oh, this is all about monkey pictures, but you get to like try a bunch of stuff that is like high enough stakes because there's money involved, but like low enough stakes because it's monkey pictures, that you can like actually try new things that like have some consequences and like feels like something that's better than you could get in like an academic study where it's like, here's $5. Do you want to like punish the person across from you? I think like there's some interesting stuff that you can experiment with when there's like that right level of stakes that the crypto has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. One thing that you might find interesting, this is kind of an aside, with as far as DAOs go, Kyle Samani, I'm guessing you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He has he generally says the most successful DAOs in crypto are actually deep in projects, which I know probably goes somewhat well with like your techno-industrialist piece as well, because they're kind of blend the physical world with crypto,
Yeah.
but then they're governed by the token holders basically, and people who actually participate in that network. What do you think about DeepIn? Have you looked into it?
Yeah. So we're investors in Demo and Daylight. And I really, I like the concept generally a lot. I think that the challenge, or the question for me when I'm looking at them is, can you ultimately get to a spot where you can do something that is like, this is like my kind of lens on everything, like stablecoins. I think the answer is like yes versus what they do. In DeepIn, I think some of the question that I always ask for anything, whether it's crypto or not, is like, will it let you do something better, faster, cheaper? And so like, I think to the extent that that is possible, and that could be like, go to market is actually just more efficient, and you can pass those savings back on. And so like yes, or in the case of Demo, most of this information is locked down, and you just like physically can't build things on top of it. So like it is useful to have that data open and let people build. But like, does it let you do something that like otherwise couldn't be done? Versus, will you attract some early users because there's a token? I know you started Helium, the IoT network, and so. No, but that's like the question kind of like generally with any project for me is like, does it allow you to do things better, faster, cheaper? And I think in some cases the answer is yes. In some cases the answer is no. But I'm very excited about DeepIn like generally as a category, and have been for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just mentioned monkeys, which brings me to this other point where there used to be a time. I mean, it's still kind of relevant today, but especially 2 years ago, where everybody would say like, okay, so what are the use cases, right? Like, what do you use crypto for anything other than just circulating money around? And you had a piece around Web3 use cases today, and I believe it mentions NFTs, DeFi, stablecoins. And I mean, those mostly have aged quite well, especially stable coins.
Yep.
And then DeFi, it seems it's getting even more traction with better regulation.
Yep.
NFTs maybe not so much, or at least in the form that we envisioned. But what would you say are like, when people ask you from the outside that are not in crypto, they're like, okay, so what are the use cases today? What would you tell them?
Yeah. I mean, stablecoins are like the clear winner here. We're investors in Bridge, and it's cool to see that just spreading into the normal economy. I think like even the tokenization of kind of everything, I think is super interesting. Like Robinhood is now making this big, beautiful presentation. I just like loved that whole presentation, whether or not they actually had access to the OpenAI shares and SpaceX shares. Like the fact that you can trade equities and ownership in private companies on chain, I think is super, super interesting. In RWAs in general, I think is interesting. Like I think everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized eventually over time. And so I think that is still happening. NFTs, like, it never excited me as like you're buying a picture of this thing and like the community is going to make it worth $1 trillion. I do think like the ability to create scarcity on the internet is like a really cool primitive to play with that I want to see like a little bit more happen there. I don't know if you've seen anything interesting in the space, but like that's like a very cool thing. You have this like abundance machine where you can make infinite copies of stuff, and the fact that you can have something scarce and digital is like really interesting. And that's one that's probably, you're right, like the least come to the least fruition, but would like to see develop more. What are your favorite use cases right now?
Well, I would say, people tend to, I used to be one of the types where I'm like, okay, we can do anything on blockchains, therefore we should try everything. And I was especially interested in non-financial use cases.
Yeah, me too.
And then I'm not sure what happened, but basically I realized that actually it being extremely good at conducting global finance, as like, Solana's vision is the decentralized NASDAQ, for example. That's actually, it's one of those layered problems. As you keep solving small pieces of it, you end up opening up new questions, which ends up being super interesting. And so I'm actually quite okay with just, trading exchanges, and then that being used to be composable with like payments, right? So for example, you might have seen X stocks, which is like tokenized stocks on chain now. And like you can do some crazy stuff like just, buy Tesla shares on chain and then collateralize them against like Farcoin. And it's like just bizarre stuff that it's play at first, but I think it could be interesting going forward. I believe like the US housing people also now might allow for you to take out a mortgage against your Bitcoin and things like this. So I think I'm just really, and prediction markets, I think, was another one that I didn't really see coming, but that's been quite interesting.
Totally. Yeah, prediction markets, I didn't see coming either. I was excited about them. We invested in a company that was, doing a new type of prediction market that ended up pivoting away from it like a few months before Poly market broke out. Because like a lot of smart people that I've talked to about it were like, we love prediction markets. Like the idea is amazing. It's like almost an impossible challenge to solve for X, Y, and Z reason. And so to see them kind of take off has been very cool. And we actually started a podcast for a few weeks. It was just like taking prediction markets and auto-generating my voice talking about like the stories of the day based on the prediction markets. I think like there's a lot of interesting stuff there, particularly when it comes to like the fire hose of shit information on, X and everywhere else. Like if you can somehow marry, we have all this noise, but then like you have to bet on it. I think that's actually a really interesting thing to have. And still Polymarket is one of the first places that I check when I hear like that something happened in the world. I'm like, all right, is this bullshit or not? I'm going to go to Polymarket and see kind of where it's trading. So I think that's very useful. I wrote a piece not that long ago, Capitalism Unchained. And I think you're right. Like idealistically, like I wish that like every platform was going to come, like be user owned and governed. And I do see those challenges with that. But I think if you can make money movement and the exchange of capital a little bit more efficient, like the impact on kind of the global economy is massive just from that alone. I've written about this a little bit as well. Like it is like the financial use cases are the ones that are like most clear. And this was in the developer piece that you mentioned or the platform piece that you mentioned earlier. Like the financial uses are the ones that are most clear and obvious and like where there is the biggest difference and where they're the most better. you're willing to make other trade-offs to be able to get that thing that is very, very good. And so like as the underlying infrastructure improves, and it's improved a ton, but as the underlying infrastructure improves and there's fewer and fewer and fewer trade-offs to make, maybe more things come on chain. But it makes a ton of sense that finance would be the first and the maybe only big use case for a while, because those trade-offs are worth making.
That Capitalism Unchained piece is actually probably my favorite piece. Probably my favorite piece on crypto in general.
Thank you.
That I use to reference. I have like some internal memos that I send the team, and I do want to touch on that maybe after this question. But following up on the current use cases, you also had some predictions, or maybe let's say desires on what you would like the next use cases to be. And I think if I see my notes here, they include regenerative finance, hyperstructures, which that's from the piece from Jacob from Zora, and decentralized science. How do you think those? Do you still have like hope for those? And second part of that question would be like, what do you think the next future use cases will actually be from today?
That's a good question. Regenerative finance, like maybe actually a little bit less. And frankly, I think the biggest change that I've had in my kind of thinking on this stuff is like I've always been an energy fan, but just I think that like energy generation and transmission, getting that right solves like 99.9% of climate problems. And so like the more that we can put towards just getting clean energy online and cheap and accessible and to where it needs to go, like that solves most of it. DeSci, it still interests me, and I think that would be one of the ones that I'd want to see kind of in the future. I think like Molecule does some interesting stuff, and I think like anytime that there's one of the most broken things I think in the system is the way that we fund research now and the way that the journal system works and all of that. And so any kind of like new mechanisms to make that work and to get the science that deserves to be funded, even if it doesn't kind of fit in the current system, I think like that is a super compelling use case. But I don't know. I mean, like I think I've come around to your view where like the next few years are really going to be about like how can you bring a bigger piece of the financial markets on chain now that the regulations are in place to enable you to do that in a way that just like works smoothly. I think once that's happening, everything gets a lot easier. You're talking about being able to to back your Tesla shares, to bargain your Tesla shares, to buy Fartcoin and all of that. Like I do think that once there's more capital on chain, it makes sense for more things to come on and plug into that. But I do think actually it's probably going to be a few years of just like kind of bring all of that together. I don't know. What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting maybe tidbits of the beginning on this intersection of attention, social, and finance. I believe Frentech did an okay first pass, and then Farcaster, Zora, and even Pump to an extent have somewhat extended that idea. But I do think there's still something interesting there that hasn't been quite articulated in a product. But I think this combination of attention, social, and finance, there's something there. I'm not quite sure what it is though.
Yeah, I wonder if that it's like an attention measurement or capture problem, or like there's certainly the like it's fun for a little while to trade things, but then like attention has to wane and move on to the next thing. So I think there's a lot of tricky mechanisms. I think like Jacob is one of the most creative people in the space, and I think like hopefully or one of the people I like to read the most as well. And so if anybody can figure out these like little things, it's probably him and that team. But yeah, it's just like a very hard problem that I think will be really interesting to solve if people figure it out.
Right. Yeah. So I want to get to now my favorite piece, okay, the capitalism piece. And I'm going to give the audience some context. So you have a piece called Capitalism Unchained, and in it, you basically argue, and I'm going to quote, crypto's ideal state is to make capitalism more effective. And this is in two parts. Part one, capitalism is good and capitalism evolves. And two, how crypto can make capitalism more effective. So I want to actually start somewhat surprisingly with number one, just given how capitalism maybe is not seen so popular in some circles at least. Can you just quickly make the case for why capitalism is good and how it evolves?
Yeah. I mean, there's the Churchill quote on democracy being the best system that we've come up with, like the worst system other than all the other ones. And I think there's probably something to be said for capitalism it is very similar. Like there's a lot of things that you can identify as like challenges with capitalism. There's inequality. There's, I think there's actually, I'm kind of writing a piece that actually talks about some of these downsides, particularly when it comes to attention and like different platforms, like really just trying to like suck our minds into the computer or into an advertisement, or like we don't have like a particularly contemplative life anymore. Like there's a lot of downsides. And then as soon as you start to say like, we should do X thing instead, and like this group of people is going to decide what that thing is, it almost invariably goes worse. Like communism kills a ton of people and creates miserable conditions. You hear people in the West talking about how awesome communism is. And then anybody who's lived through it or whose parents have lived through it are like, no. Like, do not do that. It is the worst fucking thing in the history of the world. And so like capitalism is like clearly imperfect, but it is this like beautiful system where resources do flow to the things that people want. And I think one of the areas where capitalism falls short is just like the human brain. Like it's kind of crypto as well, like where like the human brain just like takes advantage of this like big beautiful system and like has gotten really good at figuring out how to hijack it in certain cases. And like there's almost, it's like, I don't know how I'm trying to like, I took X off my phone as like one example and like put up the 1 cent thing on Twitter. I think this is actually kind of also like climate change, where like I don't know what the nuclear and solar of attention is, but like we need that nuclear and solar, because asking 1 billion people or 8 billion people or whatever to individually always make the hard choice is like just never ever going to work. But I do think often like when there are challenges with capitalism, like the best way to fight back is like with more capitalism. And so like the capitalism evolves, like child labor was bad and people died in factories all the time, and then for selfish reasons, frankly, like implements kind of better working conditions and 40-hour work weeks and all of those things. And so like just because you like capitalism and think it's good doesn't mean it's perfect. You certainly wouldn't say it was perfect back then when people were dying in factories, but it keeps getting better and better and better. And back to our conversation on kind of crypto being this like thing that evolves, like any system that you like give that kind of freedom will be higher variance, but evolves hopefully towards something better over time. And so that's kind of my capitalism is good argument. Like every measure of quality of life, other than maybe like family connection or something, like most measures of quality of life since the start of the Industrial Revolution have gone like this.
Right. You did say something interesting there about the attention seeking aspect of some of these things, and I think that ties a little bit into some of your one of your other pieces on the ultimate game, the online game, or
online game, yeah.
Like this. But let me just pause on that and then finish the second question, which is, how do you think crypto helps evolve capitalism?
Yeah, I think there were a bunch of different. Like I asked Claude kind of to divide, if you can remember it better than I can, like to define like the things that you would do to improve capitalism. It was like a list of 7 things. It was like early Claude, and I think it did a pretty good job. And I went through and like crypto had like some sort of solution for each one of them, like being able to make money flow internationally better. Lower fees means that there's more to go to the actual thing. More participation from more people across the world. Like maybe you can even like go through the list, but like there's just all of these like little things. It's not like a full fix where like capitalism without crypto was like awfully broken, and because of it, like we're going to utopia. It's just there's like a list of little things that crypto can improve, and any kind of like little improvements in how global capitalism works, and that because the system's so massive, just end up creating these like big improvements in the way the economy works around the world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of pieces or list items that makes better. I think it was enforcement of property rights, lower barriers to entry.
The enforcement of property rights is like the NFT thing that I like want to see happen. As more of our lives move online, the ability to enforce digital property rights is interesting. But yeah, still want to see more there. But sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I'll just link obviously the post to the video, and then people can check it out. It is one of my favorite pieces, so definitely check it out. Another interesting part of your writing I've noticed is you have engaged in constructive debate with some crypto skeptics, let's say. Some of them obviously maybe good faith critics, some of them maybe not so much, maybe a certain professor. And so you've actually defended it quite well. What would you say, though, is like maybe their top two strongest critiques of crypto that you agree with?
That's a really question. I think that Chris Dixon in his book talks about the casino versus the computer. And I think like the casino element like can get completely out of control and can take a lot of the like energy and oxygen and like literal liquidity out of the room. And so I think that is something that, if you look at it from the outside, and that's what gets the headlines, like that is certainly a very fair critique. I think the thing that I disagreed with the most is looking at a system like kind of in its still, we're so early, but like in its very early years compared to AI, it's like this 70-year-old journey that people have been on, or 80-year-old journey that people have been on to make AI. Looking at something like 13 years in and being like, why hasn't this like fixed the whole entire world yet? And like, this is like total bullshit because there are bad things, I think is like a poor form of argument. Like they wouldn't have, I went on a few different podcasts and talked about like stablecoins, for example, back then. People are like, yeah, but like we have, apps that do global money transfers. Like stablecoins aren't like actually going to be a thing. They're totally fine. And then you wake up 2 years later and like, it's just actually like the thing that, that companies are using to move money more efficiently, that Stripe is obviously backing in a pretty big way and will help grow, that the banks are coming in and backing now. And so like my critique is always that the short-term like noise is a really bad thing to judge on. And this is kind of the piece in the Capitalism Unchained. As long as you think that there is something that is moving towards, that is worth moving towards, which I do. And so that's the thing, like the general kind of case of argument that I disagree with most is like, there's bad things, so there will never be good thing. But certainly I think like one of the things that I would agree with most is that like there are bad things, or like it's this like big, open, messy system. And so like good things will happen and bad things will happen.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of a tweet by Daniel, and it was something like, if capitalism is so good, then why do bad things happen sometimes?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to shift gears. I think we've talked about crypto a good amount, maybe into some more product company building, startups type of stuff. Actually, before I do that, though, you just mentioned something that I think about a lot, which is, AI has actually been worked on in some form for many, many decades, right? Same with, robotics, even maybe metaverse, VR type of stuff. Crypto, I would say, in relation is maybe much newer in some cases, but obviously it's a subclass of finance. Would you agree or disagree that we're early in crypto still?
I don't know. If you look at like the Gartner hype cycle, something like stablecoins being adopted or Bitcoin being like, actually just like a safe, like in the middle of the Liberation Day stuff, I took a bunch of TQQQ that I was in, which is like triple long NASDAQ, is degenerate in the normal times, and was like a real whipsaw during those couple of weeks. But I took all of that and moved into Bitcoin because I was like, that feels so much safer. And so like the fact that we have these things that just are like becoming normalized kind of technologies and assets does feel like it's almost just like coming out of the trough of disillusionment and, just into the kind of like deployment phase, to mix metaphors with Carolina Perez. And so I think there's some of that there. I think there could be like multiple cycles. Maybe we're in late stage financial markets crypto and like still so early in what you do from there. Maybe that's kind of how I think about it.
Got it. Okay. So now shifting gears for real, you also had a piece on, I believe it was called Techno-Industrialists, and if you're in these tech conversations, everybody's obviously familiar with Peter Thiel saying on like, okay, have you stagnated, right? Like, is all the innovation happening in bits and just nothing in atoms? What do you think? And I think you made the case to be optimistic around maybe being more bullish on atoms and even integrating them between bits. What do you think that looks like today? Like, what are you excited about?
Oh my God, so much. The way that I view this is like the whole history of the world of innovation is like the beginning of time until 1970s or like 60s, innovation in atoms. The past 50 years, like a ton of catch up in bits. And now we can do all sorts of things. We can have this conversation. We can trade Fartcoin with each other. Like there's a million, we can talk to AI. Like all of that happened in like 50 to 60 years, which is like pretty insane when you think about it. And so actually, I think there's a lot of the conversation with people who like kind of hard tech that is like, software is stupid. This is the future. And like, this is the type of thing that is like meaningful to work on. And I completely don't think that that's the case. I think we spent the past like 50, 60 years almost playing catch up in the digital world to, at, you know, where we were in the world of atoms, or I don't know how you compare those one to one, but like, I think like unbelievably impressive what's been built over the past kind of 50 to 60 years on the digital side of things. And the thing that excites me now is that there is a lot of combination of these two things, whether it's, you know, companies are building hardware because they can like use software, which is cool. And so you can build factories that are more software enabled now, and maybe they get a little bit more efficient, all the way to, you know, a company like Anduril works because they have AI kind of powering a bunch of their attritable stuff. And they have software that helps kind of manage fleets of small attritable weapons and different systems. And like again, this eventually soon we'll have, you know, maybe robots that are just these intelligent things doing things for us already. Certainly the non-humanoid factories have robots that combine kind of software and hardware to do things and make things kind of cheaper, better, faster. And so I think a lot of the hard tech stuff that's happening now, and certainly the stuff that I like these kind of vertically integrated companies that combine hardware and software to do something better, faster, and cheaper, and take on incumbents. And there's just a bunch of examples of this kind of company either working, you know, at SpaceX Anduril scale, and, you know, particularly SpaceX, and I'd say Anduril is a category below, but growing fast. And then there's that across like almost every industry at that point. And so that's the thing that's exciting to me now, is not like we're throwing out software and we're returning just to atoms. It's like, wow, holy shit, we've like caught up. And now what happens when we combine these two things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that as well. I mean, you know, in a distant future when, let's say, maybe I'm not on Helios anymore, I would definitely want to do something in the world of atoms or some combination of atoms and bits. It does seem like it's just, you know, there's, you know, the Sam Altmans of the world, which is like actually very difficult ideas or very difficult startups are actually easier. I think maybe Ben Horowitz says this as well. What do you think has been, like holding back founders from going and doing more stuff in the world of atoms? Is it regulation? Is it psychological?
I think that there is probably survivorship bias to that statement, and it's probably easier in part because it's harder. And I say that because like I think there is a different type of founder who can like me, for example, not that I'd be a good, you know, software founder, but would be like a particularly bad hardware founder. So I think there's maybe a smaller group of people who both have the skills on that side of things and kind of like the knowledge of how startup works. I think a lot of them have come from, you know, SpaceX. Now there's an Anduril mafia kind of growing out. And so like that's just a smaller group of people. And you're doing a harder thing, and it requires more capital in the beginning. And there's fewer people who like want to go work for a startup who have those skills. And so just being able to like actually do something really well and move fast on the hardware side of things, you know, integrated with software, it just means that you're going to be facing less competition. I think there are, you know, companies that are being founded that that certainly will fail and are like not that kind of like level of founder. And I think that's awesome that a lot of people now are getting excited and feel they can build things. But I think it's easier when you're like this exceptional talent who's able to bring together an unbelievable team and still somehow move fast, even though hardware can be really, really slow. I think that all comes down to, one, it's easier to recruit for this like differentiated mission, like, and not all hardware is the same, but like maybe some people like making it rain with Augustus and Rainmaker. Maybe some people want to like fix the grid with Base Power Company. Maybe some people want to, you know, make supersonic planes at AstraMechanica, but like they're very specific visions for like what the future is going to be like. And like these almost sci-fi things that certainly like a group of people are going to have grown up being like, I want to go build that. And so one is just, it's easier to get talent. And then two, it's just a pure kind of like competition thing. I think it's like almost diametrically opposed from crypto, where crypto is more open. There will be competition, but you benefit from kind of network effects when things work, and you benefit from more liquidity and all of that. So it's like a very different type of moat over here to like, and like the extreme form, ideally, of something like a network effects happening, where like SaaS might actually not be that. And it's one of the reasons like just it's in the middle and I'm not, super excited about it. And then on this side, you're probably not getting like, maybe there's some like loose network effects, but like really you're getting like a whole different set of moats. The biggest of which is it's just like this really hard thing to do, that if you can build process power and scale economies around that and like actually be the one who's able to attract a lot of capital, you're just like not going to have nearly as much competition.
Right. Yeah. I want to maybe go into how you invest and what kind of companies you find interesting, what types of founders. Before that, though, I just remembered we briefly touched on the ultimate internet game.
The great online game, yeah.
The great online game, yes. And how you actually have put limits on your X usage. First, can you maybe explain what that concept is, the ultimate, the great game, to people? And then like, how would you advise people navigate this game?
So this may be the one that I got, like, it's probably my most popular piece, and like maybe the one that I've gotten, I don't know about like the most wrong, but that I like underestimated the downsides maybe a little bit. Not that they're like great. I'm not trying to like be alarmist on, but it's just like I noticed myself getting sucked in more than is productive or like healthy to the internet when I spend too much time on X. But the premise of it was we're all stuck inside, and we have this like unbelievable thing out here where you can type things into your keyboard and like make money and find all these people who are interested in the same thing that you are. And so like, actually, if you like look at what makes a game, like a video game, work, and look at what you're doing with your life stuck inside during COVID and like trying to make a life for yourself, like there's actually a lot of similarities. And like, so maybe here's a couple of ways that you can play it. I think the benefits of the internet are like absolutely unbelievable. I wouldn't, not only would we not be able to have this conversation without it right now, but like I certainly wouldn't be here without having been able to write on the internet and find a bunch of really smart people. And like, I absolutely love that aspect of it. And so, part of my like critique of that piece now might be just me being like, all right, well, like I used it and like now I don't need to like spend as much time online anymore. I'm gonna like pull the ladder up behind me. And like, if you're using the internet a lot, like what's wrong with you? It's like not healthy. So I like can get that criticism of it. I just do think like there is a balance with all of this stuff. And I feel like one of the most insidious parts for me is because it's been so useful and because I've met so many great people and because it's enabled me to build not boring, I can almost always justify spending time on the internet. I'm like, it's my job. Like I tweet, maybe a founder will see it or something, and then I'll be able to make an investment and like, it's not about like throw out your internet and like, and go out into the field. I think like modern philosophy is actually like pretty bad. Like, but his Byung-Chul Han, the Korean philosopher who like a lot of people love as being the guy on kind of modern society. He wrote a book called the Burnout Society, and he's written some other kind of interesting stuff. But I think a lot of modern philosophers are like good at identifying the disease, and then they're like, and what we should do is like return to a simpler time, and like capitalism is all to blame, and blah blah. And like that is just like not the answer and not going to happen. For me, it's like really just more like, how do you be more mindful of what you're doing at any moment? And the dangerous part of the internet for me is that like I have my phone on me all the time, and I just like I notice myself. I catch myself very often just like putting my hand in my pocket when I'm bored for 1 second. And I see this happening with AI as well. Like when I'm stuck on an essay for a second, I'll be like, let me just like dump it in Claude and get feedback, even if the feedback sucks and I never use it. Like there is something to be said for sitting still and wrestling with something, or just sitting still and like being bored and doing nothing, that I at least want to be a little bit more mindful of. I think Nadia Asperov wrote a book recently called Anti-Memetics, and I think she did as good a job as anybody as I've seen with reframing this attention thing. Is not like, you better like get your attention back because they're trying to steal it, as opposed to, holy shit, like your attention really dictates like what your lived experience is. And if you direct it well, like she's gotten very into the jhanas, if you direct it well, like you can have this really magical, wonderful experience. So it's not like, oh, don't like get sucked into X. It's more like, just be mindful of the fact that like you can do cool stuff with your attention. And so I think there needs to be like kind of a reframing around that. But to navigate the internet now, like I think it's kind of actually the same advice that I would have had then, which is like you still see, and like it's probably gotten worse, like the thread boy thing or like engagement hacking, where people write about stuff that they don't give a shit about because it's like the thing that's most likely to get them followers and now kind of creator payouts on X. But you end up in a chamber of like shitty people are going to engage with that shitty content, none of whom care about anything. You certainly don't care about the thing that you're talking about, and they don't care about the thing that they're talking about. Like, I guess the maybe general rule is like you attract what you put out on the internet. And so like, if you want to attract a bunch of people who are going to engage with your stupid, AI engagement hacking post, go for it. But like, that's probably not what you actually like want to do. So if you're really interested in like beekeeping, like talk about that on the internet, start a beekeeping podcast, write about beekeeping, like get really, really deep on it and really nerdy. And then like other people who are interested in beekeeping will find you, but like, don't be inauthentic just to get engagement. I think that part of it holds up well. Like don't be inauthentic to get engagement. Cause that's just going to like, that's what your life's going to be around you. Cause that's the type of people that you're going to attract.
Right. So be authentic. And you also wrote a very recent piece on the Great Differentiation.
Yeah.
What's it called? Salvation from slop, I believe was a line that you used. And you gave an example of Vlad from Robin Hood being like a Italian mafia boss almost in cans. Would you say that's like a related concept where in this modern world, you basically want to be authentic and utilize on your quirks authentically, obviously not like forcefully?
Yes.
Is that kind of the premise behind that one?
I've written a piece just explicitly called Differentiation before. Like, I think differentiation is like just an incredibly important thing for a whole lot of reasons. Like, it's one of the reasons that I invest in the types of companies that I invest in now, because like they're almost naturally differentiated because they're like so hard to do and weird. Or it's the reason that I wrote that piece, and I'm attracted to like John Collison's new podcast where he's in a pub, or Vlad's presentation, or there's these brothers who were walking around San Francisco with titanium statues, or bronze statues now, but want to do titanium statues, who I wrote about. They're just like are authentically French, and like are French in a way that nobody can copy, and are wearing outfits that like other people like couldn't wear. I think there's like real value in being unique. Now, like there are also realities, like you need to have a job, you need to like fit in certain ways and all of that. But I just like, I really think that as it gets easier and easier and easier to make average stuff, like AI is an average machine, the value of being differentiated, even if it's on something that seems like super niche, is just like really, to me, important. And like, if you allow, I do think there's like a bit of, the X algorithm does this, or like AI, like there's a bit of a pull just to become kind of more average, whether you're explicitly like trying to write something with AI, which will end up average, or just like, you just like give your brain over, that it's just another thing to be like super mindful of, that like, do you want to have other people's thoughts and like kind of think the same thing? Like, one of the reasons I deleted my X app was I was saying something about Mamdani, after the New York election, and it was like a true fact. I forget what it was, but I said it to my wife, and she was like, "You definitely got that off of Twitter. Like, would you like please think for yourself on this, like for 1 second?" I'm like, no, but it's like true. And she's like, "I know, but you like definitely got it on Twitter, and you're definitely being shown that. So like, just like think for a second." And so I think that there is just, it is like easier and easier and easier to think what everybody else thinks and like kind of do similar things to what everybody else does. And so as that happens, like it's just more important to think about like, what do I actually want to be doing here? What do I care about? And either for like your career prospects or whatever, or just like personally, like how do you want to feel about yourself, and like what do you want to spend your time thinking about? I do think that differentiation is just super important.
Right. How did you get into writing?
I was bored at work. I worked at a company called Breather. We brought in a professional management team in my like 6th year there, which was like too long. And I said the word enumerate in an exec meeting, and they like laughed at me kind of. And I was like, well, I don't want to be in a group of people. And I was like in context. We were talking about how like people in the company wouldn't understand the numbers in the presentation. And I was like, if I don't do something, my brain is going to die. So I took David Perel, who does the How I Write podcast now, and had a writing course, and was in the first cohort of that, just to kind of like keep my brain exercised. And then one thing led to another. They made us start a Substack as part of the course. And I just have kind of kept doing it ever since.
And how do you, because you are quite prolific. I mean, you write quite frequently. I'm super impressed by the output. How do you what is the process for that? Do you just force yourself to write?
I used to, and I actually am trying to figure out the right balance now, because like I came into this year being like, I am going to just like, I'm going to be a thinker. I'm going to give myself space. And I changed the way that sponsorships work. So like, instead of having slots where like you get this day, it's like you get a certain number. And whenever I feel like writing, I'll put the sponsor in. And I think for a little while there, like it actually was harder, because I was like, oh shit, like I have no deadline. Like I think there's like a real value in a deadline, even to quality, not just quantity, where it forces you to engage with something and like wrestle with it until it's good. Whereas if you don't have a deadline looming, you're like, this one's probably not great. I'm just going to like throw this one out and I don't need to do anything this week. And so I'm still, wrestling with that balance with the process. It depends on the type of piece. Like sometimes I'll just be like noodling on some ideas for a while. I'll try to read a bunch of books. And those are the more like thought piecey ones. The Great Differentiation, it's like kind of a concept that's been running in the background the whole time. But then I saw the Robinhood thing right after noticing Collison's podcast, and like one thing led to another. I just wrote that in an evening. And then with a deep dive, this could be like in a Meter, which I wrote about in the beginning of the year, was like a 25,000 word piece. They actually like printed it and turned it into a book. And that was like 13 months of conversation, of trying to understand networking, of kind of like constantly having that one, somewhere in the background and working on it. So the process is like very different depending on the type of piece. But I always like to be like, on a weekend, if I have free time or like the kids are out of town or something, I'm going to use it to write, just because I like sitting here and reading and trying to make sense of the things that I'm engaging with. But I'm trying to find the balance between not forcing myself to write shit just to write it, and being able to like wrestle enough with the ideas, even if they don't seem perfect at first.
And how do you, I struggle with this, and I'll ask maybe a two-ended question here. How do you decide what to write? And furthermore, how do you decide what to read?
The read question is great. I've been reading a lot of books recently. I got shit on the internet for saying that you can just summarize Anna Karenina with ChatGPT, and I still read like hundreds of books. But ironically, I think like I read a ton just because I like it. And it's like, if I look at my book app now, and I have a new book out, which I'll pump later, but is secret now, but is awesome and is gonna hopefully kick Kindle's ass. But my last few, I'm reading about Ramanujan right now. Was reading the luxury strategy book. Before that, I read two of Byung-Chul Han's posts, The Burnout Society and Vita Contemplativa. I read the book that Graydon Carter, who was the Vanity Fair editor, wrote. It's like, it's kind of all over the place. And a lot of that is just like, my memory is shit, as you can tell from like even my ability to recall things from like previous essays, specifics that I wrote when I spent a ton of time engaging with them. And so it's not to be like, if you ask me a question about Graydon Carter right now, like maybe I'd get it right, maybe I wouldn't, but I'm just like trying to find interesting things that like can pop together in my brain, and like maybe something interesting will pop out. It's like a very long way of saying there's like that big explore phase where I'm just reading randomly. And then if there's a specific topic that I'm writing about, like, Meter, I was reading as many blog posts as I could on networking. I was listening to podcasts with like networking legends. I was reading kind of all the internal stuff that Meter had. When I'm writing about Base Power Company, I read all of Brian Potter's posts on the grid, and then read the book The Grid. And then, like there's just like a bunch of different stuff that I'm reading that is like very, very specific. But when I'm not working on a specific essay, I try to go as broad as possible and just kind of like see what happens.
What piece of writing advice would you give to a younger you?
It's a good question. It's gonna go back to the previous kind of points that I made, which is like write about stuff that you're interested in, because like it is hard. Like it's not fun to write unless you like really are interested in the thing that you're writing about, and be like a little bit specific about the type of thing that you're interested in. So one of the best pieces of advice from that writing course, it wasn't really about like technically becoming a better writer. I think the best piece of advice that they give is like find your personal monopoly, which they define as like the intersection of like two things that maybe a lot of people cover, or three things that maybe a lot of people cover, but nobody covers that intersection. So I was like, what if I did like Philly sports and tech and business strategy or something in the beginning, or like culture and tech and business strategy. And then over time, you can like loosen that a little bit. But I do think like finding that thing that like almost nobody else in the world will care about as much as you, or will have thought about as much as you, or will even just like apply that lens to in the same way that you do. I think that's really interesting. And then just keep writing. Like it does take practice to like, I would like, it's never easy to write a piece now. It's not like I just like have it down and I can write. Like it's still very hard every time, but at least like doing it a bunch makes you realize like that at some point, if you just struggle with it enough, it'll come out.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, we are short on time, so I'm going to jump to the last section here, which I want to talk about investing in startups. How did you get into investing? Was it through writing, or did they kind of happen simultaneously?
It was, I mean, I started my career in finance. I like, always said that when I retired, I wanted to invest, write, and talk to smart people. And so was able to at least like skip into writing and talking to smart people. And then kind of started investing on the side of that. In the beginning, like it was very COVID, but in 2020, like started just doing a couple SPVs in friends' companies. That was a bit of a pain because I couldn't lock down any actual number to tell them or fight for allocations. And so started a fund in 2021, kind of small fund. And have like, I think those were both, kind of the first two were pretty broad and invested in a bunch of stages and different types of companies. And over time, I've kind of tightened my taste on the type of stuff that we like.
And what would that be? What's the type of stuff you're interested in?
Yeah. So on fund three, it was like hard startups. And like, that's a kind of like way too loose thing. It meant like kind of not SaaS, but like either crypto where there's no business model, or like these vertically integrated companies that are just very, very hard. I think right now, frankly, the current focus is mostly these vertically integrated companies. The way that I'm kind of structuring the new fund is like almost 60 to 70% will be that. And then there's like the other pocket. And I think crypto will be the majority of that pocket. But there's just like a bunch of things that are happening right now. I guess I really don't love, maybe this is like just mimicking Peter Thiel, but like the less competition you can face, the better. And I think that like the ones of these that do it right will face the least competition, and like their big competition will be when they actually just go ahead and fight the incumbents. And so like the less money that you can spend on like trying to steal people from like a similar product kind of early stage is good. And so that's been kind of the core of my focus for, let's say for like this fund. My like recent investments have been probably like 80% that, 20% crypto, and like very little AI, because I think I have one, the competition thing. Yeah. Two, I think you have to like fully be in it or be out.
What's when a founder is pitching you to join the round, what is like the one thing that you look at that like convinces you?
Is that so hard? Exist? No, it doesn't exist. This is like it's an impossible thing to identify. Like there's something about like, you can just tell that they make people around them like want to do like really, really, really excellent work. And it's like a hard thing to define, but I think it's like one of those, it if you see it type of things. Honestly, Zach Dell at Base was just on Invest Like the Best. And there is a little bit of the like, it's like worth listening to, because like it's hard to describe in a sentence, but if you just listen to the way that he describes how the grid works and then describes how Base works, and like at every layer of detail that you could possibly want, down to like how you would finance a particular asset in the business, that is just like a very clear, like have been doing this for a while, but like also have gone through that idea maze and like really thought of everything and thought about the history and thought about like what the technical enabler is that allows this particular approach, which is the right approach to be done right now. Like just a real depth and familiarity with the topic that you're attacking. I don't think it has to be like a lifelong passion for the thing. And I think like that actually, whether it's like PhDs pursuing like the particular type of fusion they studied in their PhD program, I think that can like lead you astray pretty often. But it's when you have decided that you want to do a particular thing that you like understand that thing as well or better than anybody, and you have like one piece of it that you think will kind of unblock the bottleneck that has held that industry back.
Got it. Well, last question. You obviously have a very unique skill set in that you're a very good storyteller, but you also talk to a lot of startups and you cover them. A lot of founders listening to the show. What would be the top storytelling advice you would give to founders?
I'm going to let you guess what my advice is going to be.
Be authentic.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I like, it's differentiate, be authentic. Like I do think like telling the same kind of story as anybody else is like you're going to get lost in the crowd probably. And so like a certain type of video gets popular, then everyone does that. But if you're not the first person who did that, like I think Cluely, whatever you believe about Cluely, like the worst thing that's going to happen is like the next 50 companies that tried to do the Cluely strategy without having like come up with it themselves. I think that that's going to be pretty gross. And so I don't know if there's like something like really weird about you and your team, or like the real reason that you came to do the thing that you want to do, and you're a really good writer, then write. If you're like good at video, then like do a video. But I think like everybody has the same, thing where they have the same 50 investors and they have the same whatever. And it's like announced like, the second coming of God. It just like gets tired after a little while, and you don't stand out. And so like maybe wait until you have something to say. And that could be early. Like there could be just this like driving reason that you're starting this company, and you should write a manifesto that is like passionate and powerful and like, up there with the all-time greats. Or you don't say shit for a little while until you've like actually done something worth talking about. And then you say like, by the way, we've been quiet this whole time because we've done like this. I think that the advice is like, very different depending on who you are. But like, I'd say that the main advice is don't just be like, don't take advice on this, I guess. Like the main advice is don't just be like, all right, well, it's our pre-seed, so we have to write the blog post announcing the company, and it's our seed now, so we got to talk about our progress. Like that shit's boring, and there's like hundreds of thousands of companies in the world, and so like nobody has time for that. And so like do something different, or just enough to get by and like have a presence on the internet, but don't just do the same stuff.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for the time. Where can people find you if they're, want to just read, or our founders?
Yeah, notboring.co, and then at Packy M on Twitter. And I bought the .com actually, so maybe that soon, but I've been sitting on it for 6 months and haven't made the switch, so I need to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.